Thank you. And I think we agree that it's been two great days in Berlin. The last time we met was in Lisbon. I can hardly remember what it was. It was a long time ago. But I remember that in my concluding remarks then, I argued for a more self-confident and outward-looking Europe. A Europe not primarily focused on protecting its values and interests, important as that is, but also in projecting them in its near and its somewhat more far abroad. And that, I noticed, was the key in also making Europe, if not a global power, but then at least a global player. The alternative, I think that was clear already then, was to become just a playground for the others. So where then are we today? We face an increasingly revisionist Russia, we face an increasingly assertive China, and we face an increasingly unpredictable United States. We face a world in which our historical ally across the Atlantic is in a phase of strategic contraction. And we see a world not only of greater powers competing, but also middle powers creating rooms for themselves. A world of an increasingly challenged European Union, talking about a rules-based order, but where increasingly great and middle powers alike are creating these rules for themselves. And let me add and further underline two further aspects of our predicament. The first, and that is perhaps still the most important, that we are in a world not only of geopolitical tensions dividing, as they are, but also of global challenges that can only be handled if we, irrespective of everything else, try to meet them together. We can discuss whether we are in the middle of halfway through the pandemic or not. Variant follows variant. We started with the Alpha variant. That was 1 year ago. We are already at the 15th letter of the Greek alphabet. There are only 9 letters left. And the ominous message of the Omicron variant is that the virus can adapt faster and more fundamentally than many thought possible only months ago. No one knows what might lie ahead on the road to Omega. We are dependent on scientists across the world working together. We are dependent upon global value chains that are open and functioning to produce the vaccines, the therapeutics, and the tests that we need all over the world. We are depending on mechanisms of global solidarity to overcome the gross and dangerous inequities that we see. We are dependent, further down the road, on a global health architecture much stronger, much more robust, and much more effective. No one is safe until everyone is safe. And then, in addition, there is, of course, climate change. Up in the Arctic, above Lykke and myself, we see it happening 3 times faster than anywhere else. A new area of cooperation or tension is opening up. We see the world stumble from COP to COP. We have just passed number 26. Next, Egypt, 27. Then Emirates, 28. But deeds must follow words. And these are challenges that can only be met with increased global cooperation. Much increased global cooperation. And in a way, of course, this is a situation which should provide an opportunity for a truly global Europe. We see the necessity of cooperation. Others do as well. We see the necessity of competition. Others do as well. But perhaps we see clearly the need not only for one, but for both in combination. Here, I believe Europe must step up further. My second point is different but related. We see a Europe that is often overlooks defensive, afraid, and hesitant. And there are reasons. There's turmoil around our borders with all of the effects on our societies that we are aware of. But I think there's also a creeping awareness of the fact that we are increasingly falling behind in the race to create, to master and control the technologies that will shape our future. Mark Leonard reminded us yesterday that we used to say that Europe is an economic giant but a political dwarf. That was true some years ago, but soon it will no longer be. Not that we are becoming a political giant, but that there is a risk of us becoming an economic dwarf as well. Just look at the figures. We are in the early stages of the transition from the industrial age to the digital age. New knowledge is creating increasing possibility day by day. Artificial intelligence will truly transform the world in the decades ahead. At the moment, Europe only accounts for 7% of the private equity investments in AI globally. Investments in Europe is less than 25% of that in China, less than 10% of that in the US. That will have profound effects in the decades ahead. And we look at that what is shaping the future even further ahead, it looks even worse. In a ranking of the best 25 universities in the world, 6 are in Europe. None of them is in the EU. Among the top 50 universities in the world, there are 7 times more in Asia than in the EU. And this is, just to be clear on that, this is not an order given by God. This is the result of political action or inaction. We have a 13+ trillion economy, but the EU still misses almost 110 billion euros in R&D spending in order to reach, or if we're to reach, the Lisbon target of spending 3% on R&D that was set more than 20 years ago. And we are missing 110 billion euros in spending, and the figure 3%, which was set more than 20 years ago, is still, I believe, not sufficiently ambitious if we look at what is ahead of us. With 85% of economic growth in the years ahead happening outside of the EU, and with the EU economy in a couple of decades being less than 10% of the global economy, then just turning inwards and believing that we can be in some sort of way autonomous or whatever from the rest of the world is nothing less, I would argue, than a suicidal misunderstanding. Once upon a time, Europe rose to global prominence by opening up to and exploring the world. We opened our markets, internally as well as externally, and we opened also our minds. We were simply the best. But the mood today is sometimes dangerously different. Now the EU, believe it or not, is reluctant to ratify even a trade agreement with Canada, not to speak with other parts of the world. There are some bright spots. In the last week, we just put the final elements of the Galileo global navigation system in space. That's good. But astonishingly enough, Europe is trying to keep digital flows out of the trade agreements that we, after all, are pursuing, while it's really the digital flows more than the container flows that are going to shape the wealth and the possibilities of the future. Andrew Bradford has written about and coined the phrase the Brussels effect, extremely popular phrase in Brussels. That's fine and well, as long as we have a truly competitive economy that is oriented towards the rest of the world, then it will work. But we're spending on the future much too weak, and with the word competitiveness rarely heard of in Brussels, I'm increasingly concerned that we will get instead a Brussels defect. We are, as I point out now and then, we are the European Council on Foreign Relations. But as the last panel reminded us, if we are not credible on the rule of the law, we are not credible across the world. If we are not credible on the competitiveness of our economy, we are not credible around the world. If we are not seen as investing in the future, we are not credible around the world. And those are issues that should also be uppermost in our minds. By that, I just want to say thank you for coming, and thank you for contributing to the debates, and thank you for everyone that's made it possible. Felix Mengel, Charles Taylor have been behind the scenes making it possible. And then we have Mark, or we don't have Mark, since he went off to plot with the new German government over something. We have Alba, I guess, somewhere, and we have Wess there, we have Wessela, and we have everyone else of the staff. And then we had a great time in Lisbon some years ago. It's been great days in Berlin. Next year, see you all in Prague. Thanks.